You're listening to the Virtual Freeway Podcast, hosted by your favorite duo, Asher and Sheriston. Your source for knowledge, tips, and interviews of people around the world taking on flexible work in growing digital space. We hope this podcast helps put you on the path to doing something special and empowers you toward your entrepreneurial spirit. Let's get the journey started.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode in season 1 of the Virtual Freeway Podcast. My name is Asher.
My name is Sheriston. How you doing, Asher?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. For those that knew us from before, we had a podcast called the Millennium Misfits. We decided to pivot a little bit. We're changing it up, and we're starting the Virtual Freeway Podcast. So what can you expect with this podcast? You can expect knowledge, tips, and interviews on flexible work. The main premise of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create, I guess, maybe a community of people that understand the virtual movement that is taking place right now. A lot of people are transitioning towards digital work, I guess, or into a digital space, I should say.
Virtual work, or however you want to call it.
Exactly. You can call it, there's many different terms that you can call it, but everybody understands that we're on this virtual freeway towards a digital space, right? So many people are working from home. Many people are making money online. You see people teaching abroad and many other things. And today, actually, the main topic that we're going to be talking about is teaching English abroad. But first, before we jump into that topic, I kind of want to say a little bit about ourselves. So I'll start with me. Obviously my name is Asher. I'm from Canada, and Sheriston is my friend, and he's also from Canada, and we met in university. In terms of a little bit of our backgrounds, I'm somebody that has another podcast on the side. I do a podcast with my brother called the MMA Brothers. So we are getting a little experience when it comes to podcasting, and Sheriston has another podcast, which I'm sure he can explain to you right now.
Yes, sir. So I run the Generation Hustle podcast with another friend of mine. That's focused on business and entrepreneurship and just that finance world and marketing and that niche. And so this is kind of out of left field and a completely different kind of train of thought, but it's a different world right now that we're trying to look at. So I think this is going to be interesting, and I want to get interesting people on here to kind of tell us about their lives and tell us about how they kind of monetize their future into the digital world. So super excited for this one, man.
100%. I'm excited for it too, because, we hear these things, or we hear these stories of people that are like making all this money online, or people that have found a way or found like the hack, or, are working from the beach and doing all this stuff, like living the way they want to live is what I'm trying to say. Right. So are those stories real? Are those stories fake? We're going to find out for you.
Exactly. Let's avoid the Forex traders and those guys, but you know what we're talking about. The real entrepreneurs who have a business going on.
Exactly. We're going to avoid the pyramid schemes. We're not going to try to get you into some weird traps. So we're going to make sure we vet everyone, make sure that we do some research and find out what they're talking about is true, and then get them on the podcast for them to share some knowledge with you. But a little bit about me to continue. I'm actually currently in South Korea. I'm teaching English, and it kind of goes to show how we're able to host a podcast, right? In not even two different countries, 2 different continents. We are thousands and thousands of kilometers away, but we're able to connect, and we're able to create this podcast and give you guys content. So I've been here for the last 4 or 5 months almost. So it's a 1-year contract. I am teaching at a private organization. And so far so good. I like Korea. It's fun. The cases here aren't too bad in terms of corona, so there is a little bit more freedom compared to other countries. But with the vaccine rolling around early next year, I think things are going to be looking much better in Canada, in Korea, and hopefully we can get ourselves back to our normal life. But in this episode, that's kind of like the main topic I want to be talking about: teaching English abroad, how you can kind of get started with that, what your options are, and maybe any other finer details as well. So Sheriston, you want to hit me with any questions right off the bat?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm super excited for this because I was so happy to hear that you got this done. And for me, I was like, this is something that I've always dabbled with. So it's interesting to hear your side of the story. So let's get started. So obviously, tell me first about what attracted you to that side of the world, to South Korea specifically. Did you always know that you wanted to teach English, or was it just like, hey, let me look what's out there, and it kind of just fell in your lap?
It honestly came about because a friend of mine was doing it. Like, so my brother's wife's friend, right? I just happened to be following her on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then one day she just happened to have these stories of her, like, teaching Asian students. I didn't know which country it was. And so my curiosity just like got to me, and I'm like, what? I remember in Canada, and now I see all these stories and snaps and of her in a different country doing different things. So she told me, it's like, yeah, I'm teaching English abroad and stuff. And then I was like, really? So I just kept on asking questions, and I kind of got those details. And then at that time I was working in Canada. I was a junior accountant. I'm not going to say the company I was working for, but I was a junior accountant. And
They miss you
yeah.
a lot.
I'm sure they miss me a lot. And yeah, I was a junior accountant at the time. And not that I hated my job, but close to hating my job. I was kind of at a crossroads where I was kind of like, you know what? I don't know if I want to continue doing this. A lot of my friends were studying for their CPA. I kind of started that process, and then I was questioning myself, saying, I don't know if this is what I want to continue to do, because I was in love with the profession. So from there, I obviously asked a bunch of questions, started doing my own research, and then I realized, I'm like, hey, this is something that I may enjoy doing. I did have some teaching experience, kind of tutoring, I should say, working at Kumon. I don't know if some people know what that organization is, but I did that when I was in high school. And then from there, I kind of just made up my mind, and I said, you know what, like, this is something that I'm going to do. And I remember telling my friends, and they're all like, oh, really? You're going to do that? Are you crazy and stuff? And I'm like, I guess I'm kind of crazy. I'm going for it. And 6 months later, I was out of the country. So right now, this is actually my second time doing this, right? So the first time
Right.
was in 2018 for a year to August 2019. And then I came back in August of 2020. And I've been here, like I said, for 4 or 5 months. And the second reason why I came back was because I fell back into my old profession. I kind of fell in love with the idea of flexible work. And, in terms of the pandemic in the news, South Korea was, one of the top countries in terms of dealing with the virus effectively. So I felt like I would have had more freedom. I'd have been safer. I would have had my flexibility back, and I would be able to have more time to focus on things that I want to achieve. Because at the time when I was back in Canada, I was working a lot of hours, especially close to month end. I'd be in the office till like 11 p.m. So I kind of said, you know what, man, while I'm young, let me kind of try and figure this thing out. And Sherston and I obviously have started some podcasts together, and we're hoping that we can continue to spread the knowledge. So that's kind of a long answer.
No, I love it. I love it, and it's cool to see how you kind of came to that realization. Obviously, and I'm with you on that same boat. Working in finance and accounting, you have that cyclical nature, and it gets you right, and you want to just get out and do something different. So you said this was your second stint. How how much are you enjoying this right now, considering this is your second time going back to the same place? And if you had known, that you would have this opportunity, would you have done this earlier?
No, actually, I think the timing fell perfectly, because sometimes what's the word? Sometimes it's like there's the fear of missing out that you have, right?
Right.
There's also that idea of like, oh, am I making a mistake? If I had just finished university and gone straight to Korea, I felt like I would have been like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Everyone back home is studying, they're working in their professions that they went to school for, yada, 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 right? So I would have
Right.
had that lingering feeling deep down, being like, oh, am I making a mistake and stuff? So I think the timing kind of worked out for me, where it's like I'd experienced that. I knew that it wasn't really for me. And then I kind of just told myself, I'm like, you know what? I just need to do this. I think my heart's telling me this is the right thing to do. And then in terms of how the comparing the second time I'm here versus the first time I'm here. The first time, you're obviously, if you're dealing with the culture shock, you're dealing with like the missing people and family, friends and family from home, and obviously adjusting to your surroundings, all that stuff, right? So um the second time has been almost smooth. I don't have those feelings anymore.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like weird, because like, wait, why don't I miss anybody?
To
That's
all
not to
of
be
his friends
rude.
and family listening to this,
I know, not to be rude. I love everybody, obviously, but It was hard the first time, man. The first 3 or 4 months, like I literally had thoughts of being like, bro, I'm quitting tomorrow. I'm just hopping on a plane. I'm going back home. But
Yeah.
after fighting those thoughts, maybe like 5, 6 months later, you kind of hit a stride, or you get to a point where you're kind of like you accept it and you're used to it now. So it does take a while for those feelings to rub off, but second time around, I'm not experiencing those, which is good.
For sure. So let's talk about that, man, because I want to know how that was, like that initial culture shock was, and how you kind of maneuvered that. So with the first time that you were going to do this, can you tell us, or tell me and our listeners, obviously, about how you prepared and how you did the research? Like, where did you look? Like, what were your resources that you looked at in order to prepare yourself for that first visit? And obviously, it was still a culture shock. So how was that?
Yeah, so in terms of preparation, there's plenty of countries that do this, not just Korea. You can do it in Japan, you can do it in China, I think
Right.
Vietnam, like Thailand, like pick and choose a country, Taiwan. They have their own requirements that you need in order to get a job there. So in terms of finding the jobs online, you can some even look on what you call it, Indeed. You can look on Indeed and you can find postings there. You can
Right.
find certain recruiters that are hiring for certain countries. For example, there's a recruiter called Eclipse for South Korea. There's also a difference between whether you want to go the private route versus the public route, right? So
Right.
if you want to work for private organizations like not tutor, sorry, academies versus teaching in a public school, those are going to obviously have different requirements as well. I've done both. I started off in the public system.
Right.
Now I'm in the private system. The public system does take a little bit of time to get a job in there because you're working with the government and stuff like that. The private system, you can get a job much faster. So, in terms of what I needed to get a TEFL, which is a teaching English as a foreign language certificate. That took about 120 hours. So it's kind of proof to show like, hey, I can teach English, right?
Right.
It's a certificate, and that can open doors for you in terms of what jobs you can apply for.
And
And
that's all
then
online.
that's all online. You can
Right.
also get some hours in person too. Like there's companies that you can go to that you can get training for.
Right.
Excuse me. And then most of these places will require a university degree as well. It doesn't have to be specifically in English; it could be in anything. Just having a university degree, and then the TEFL sometimes is a requirement, sometimes it's not. And then obviously they'll do a criminal background check, and yeah, maybe a couple other things in terms of like paperwork, but those are pretty much the major requirements. And then in terms of getting up and packing my bags and what I brought here, I honestly just brought my PlayStation, clothes for every season because there's winter here. It does snow and does get cold. So bringing some winter clothes for each season, bringing some entertainments on my PlayStation, and then yeah, just like a bunch of clothes that I could fit in 2 suitcases, and that was pretty much it.
I love that PlayStation was the first thing on the list. Like that was the
It
first
had
thing
to
you
be.
said.
It had to be because I was like, what am I gonna do in my apartment when I'm not working, you know?
Exactly, exactly. All right. So that's a list or of everything that you had to go through and everything that you had to prepare. What were the things? I mean, that looks like a complete list and that looks like you covered everything, but were there anything that you missed? Was there anything that you kind of can look back on and be like, hey, I should include this or I should have done that?
Yes. So for people that are leaving, I kind of had an issue with my banking. So one of my
Right.
cards they expired, right? And so you're gonna deal with this in terms of like obviously being outside the country and trying to talk to companies or accounts or stuff that you have set up back home because you're outside the country and you're just calling people and you're asking them to do stuff for you, especially banks, which is a headache. Um, they think you're a scammer or like you know
Yep.
what I mean? Like, imagine you're just calling them being like, hey man, I need you to change this, I need you to send me a card, I need you to do this, blah blah blah. Even though you give them all the correct information, they kind of like, yo, is this person like who they really say they are? But you can't physically walk into an establishment and then make orders. So that was the problem that I had. So for those people that are deciding to go abroad, make sure you don't have anything that's kind of expiring anytime soon.
Right.
Obviously stock up on like medications and all the other stuff that whatever your daily essentials are, make sure that you have a bunch of those for at least a year for when your contract until your contract expires. And yeah, that's a big one for me, the banking. Make sure that your credit cards or your debit cards are not expiring because it will be a headache to get that stuff resolved while you're abroad, that's for sure.
I feel like those are a headache even when you're in the country. So being abroad, I can't even imagine what that was like.
Yeah, man. It was insane having to navigate those waters, but luckily, family came through, so it worked out.
I love it. I love the same family that you don't miss, by the way, but that's okay.
Exactly. I'm like, thanks, don't miss you.
So, all right. So now this is your second stint kind of teaching English in South Korea. Obviously, it's different, like based on what program everyone would want to choose. But can you kind of describe your program and your students in the classrooms that you teach and how that's been structured?
Yeah. Um, so for those that don't know, in Korea, English is like taught as a second language.
Right.
In Canada, we learn French as a second language in school. So same thing here. They go up until middle school, I believe, is where they're continued to learn English. So most people in the country have like a basic understanding of English, right? Very very simple stuff like how are you, where are you from, blah blah blah. Just like the amount of French that you know is like the amount of English that they know, kind of thing,
Right.
right? So they can count and all that stuff, right? So um, many parents obviously want their kids to get educated and understand English. So in Korea, there's a bunch of private organizations that teach English. And as I'm sure, like a lot of people know, it's in Asia, like at least in Japan, Korea, and China and stuff, education is big. Like they force their students to go to school all the time. Like
Right.
they'll we finish their public school around like 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. depending if they're in high school, and then they go to these private institutions after from like either from 4 p.m. or 7 p.m. to like 10 p.m. And this is like every day and sometimes on the weekend too. So like it's very rare that you see the students having a part-time job like in high school and stuff like that because they're just so focused on like school study, right? um
It's like mandatory tutoring, right? Like after school.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's the grind is insane that they put them through at such a young age.
Yeah.
um so it's curious. I heard about it, but then when I saw it happen, I was just like, wow, like these kids, they don't make sense now. Why like all these international students that you see coming to Canada and whatnot, like they're so smart and they score so high just because of how rigorous the education system is here. So in terms of what I'm teaching them, like it depends obviously, if you're going to be in the public system or in the private system, and also depends on the material the private system wants to cover. Some are particular in what you're going to teach. They tell you right ahead of time to say this is the curriculum, this is what they're going to learn the first week, second week, third week, whatever and stuff, and then it's your responsibilities to kind of create a lesson around that.
Right.
Some places will say, oh, you're free to do whatever you want, teach them, go for it, kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
then it kind of like, oh, like I don't know what to do, like, and then you can kind of get a little bit lost, but at the same time that kind of gives you some flexibility and some freedom to have fun and trying to do something creative outside the box that can make your students have a fun class. So yeah, it depends on the organization that you're with. And in terms of the public system in Korea, if you're getting a job in those schools, you will be teaching with a co-teacher. So that
Okay.
means that you and a Korean a teacher, him or her, will be in the class together, and so you'll be teaching in English, and then if there's any stuff that needs to be translated and stuff, your Korean teacher will translate it to the students. So a lot of people get confused. They're like, wait, if the Korean teacher can speak English, then why is the foreigner teacher there? But the answer to that is that they want the students learning from a native English speaker, right? So the
Right.
Korean teacher could understand some English or maybe understand English very well, but they want the students to be able to learn from a native speaker because, accents and, just the flow of how conversation is coming from a native versus a second language learner, it's much different. So
For
that's
sure.
the reason why.
Yeah, and there's like all the nuances that you can't really get unless it's a native speaker. So I definitely get that. So I think it's sorry, I think I cut you off there.
No. I was just gonna say you're 100% correct. Like, if I had learned French, and became fluent in it, I definitely wouldn't be speaking it like a Frenchman from Paris. You know what I mean? So there's
Exactly.
definitely a big difference.
Yeah, my cousins and friends always make fun of me because I'm too proper with how I speak French. But anyway, that's a different point. But one thing I wanted to ask you about this whole experience right now is, and we've talked about like the concrete aspects of it, how the program is laid out, what to expect, how to structure your classes, and things like that. But in terms of actually living that lifestyle, and I'm not going to put you on the spot to be like, hey, tell me how much money you're making. But obviously, we want an understanding of how reasonable it is what you're making. Like, how are you able to get around? Are you able to have a comfortable experience while you're living out there? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So most jobs. So we're talking Canadian dollars.
Right.
I don't know what the equivalent would be in USD, but they usually pay about 2,000 US dollars, as what I'm guessing. I don't know if 2,000 US dollars equates to about 2,500 Canadian. I'm not sure. I don't have a calculator on me right now, but
Yeah.
uh, so that's about the amount of money that you're going to be paid. But most, if not almost all places, will pay for your rent for the place that you're going to be living in. So you don't have to worry about the rent, and that money is just paid to you every month. The only things you have to pay for, some places will pay your utilities bills, but you got to pay for your own utilities, your water, your heat, and your food.
Okay.
Um, and it's enough money to survive here. Like the cost of living isn't too high. It's kind of comparative to Canada. Um, and yeah, comparative to the states as well. Healthcare isn't too expensive as well here, and so with the amount of money that you make, it is possible for you to travel to neighboring countries on vacation days. The public system will give you more vacation days than the private system, so
Right.
that's one thing people need to remember. And yeah, during the winter break when students are in school or in the summer break, it's a time when a lot of teachers like to travel around Asia or go back home if that's what they choose to do. And they made enough money to do that. So not the most money in the world, but it definitely gives you enough money that you have freedom to travel a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. And just to go back to your point, I was Googling it while you were talking. For reference, right now, a 2,000 US dollars is 25.68 in Canadian dollars. So, yeah, so that's a conversion there. So, it's good to know, obviously, because that's one of the biggest things that I think put people off because we don't really get too much information into the money and how you can live out there and your living costs and things like that. So, aside from all of that, say you're speaking to someone who's thinking of doing this for the first time and they're just not sure outside of the money, outside of the travel experience, what would you say is probably the best lesson or best feeling that you can get from an experience like this?
uh, I would say just the feeling of knowing you could do it, it's a very scary thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was scary for me too, knowing that like I'm saying goodbye or going into an unknown world in a country where people don't speak English as their first language. It's a lot of unknowns. It's very scary. And then you always go through these thoughts in your head, like what if like I get sick, or what if like a tsunami happens. You know what I mean? Like your brain would just tell you like all these different crazy scenarios about what's gonna happen, and then nobody's gonna be there to help you. And what if I get stuck on the train and nobody can understand me? What if like I mean like all these
To be
different
fair,
what if. What's up?
that was a huge jump to go from what if I get sick to a tsunami, but I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
No, I'm not even joking because like I used to live like on the coast of Korea, right?
Right,
I
right.
was right by the ocean, and I legit thought that. I'm like, bro, what if like a tsunami happens and like it just takes me out? Like that.
Legitimate fear. Yeah.
Yeah, it literally crossed my mind. And yeah, like I think the biggest thing is just knowing that like once you get through that experience that hey, I can do it, and like I survived, it kind of gives you confidence to know that you can kind of tackle anything else that comes across from you later on in life. So I think that's a big one. A lot of personal development going through this journey. So you may not love teaching, you may not love the other little things that come with the job or being in Asia, but definitely the personal growth that you're going to experience from doing something like this is rewarding. It may pay dividends later on in life.
100%. I think just traveling in general, I think gives a different perspective to a lot of people that they wouldn't get, staying in their country that they were born forever. So something like this, being able to work, make some money, get a new experience, and travel at the same time, I think kind of sums all that up. And I'm definitely always trying to look at this. So, and I've been talking to you about this behind the scenes as well in terms of looking into this. So, would you suggest any websites off the top of your head right now? Obviously, we'll include more when we put out this video, but would you direct people where to go in terms of where you would recommend us if they're trying to do something like this?
Again, like it's hard depending on the country that you're choosing, but I would just obviously give my details on Korea. So for those that are interested, check out EPIK. It's called EPIK, English Program in Korea. Check them out. They hire teachers for the public school system, and they have hiring periods, I think, in February and in September or August, I should say. So check out their website. They post a lot of information on how to apply. You can apply through recruiters. They give a list of recruiters that they work with. So I would recommend going through a recruiter the first time. Make
Okay.
sure the recruiters aren't charging you any money. It should be free. They shouldn't charge you anything. Use a recruiter's reason why is because the recruiter will kind of help you go through the steps. You can apply directly through EPIK yourself, but you're kind of like confused in terms of like what to do next and stuff. And the recruiters have been
Right.
through this process, have hired a bunch of people. So they're going to walk you through everything step by step, and it's a much easier process coming here. And yeah, for in terms of like applying directly to private organizations, the main difference between the public and the private system is that you can actually choose exactly where you want to live, right? So let's
Right.
just say I want to work for a private institution in Seoul. I can apply directly to that private institution if they have a job opening and then get a job there. But the public system, they hire a bunch of teachers and they spread them across the country
Okay.
because they try to put a native speaker, a native English speaker in every school across South Korea. So
Right.
they know that most people are going to be like, I want to live in Seoul. I want to live in Busan. I want to, live ABCD. So
Right.
like, no, not everybody can live in Seoul. So we're going to have to put people in the different cities and towns across the country. So that's the kind of the main disadvantage for going with the public system. But at the same time, you do get more vacation days. It is a more comfortable teaching environment. And yeah, it's much different from private, because private institutions, they do get a bad rap sometimes because, obviously parents are paying money for the students to go to these places. So they can be a little bit harsh in terms of the way they treat some of their foreign teachers. They have expectations, right?
Right.
Some places are worse than others. Some places are better than others. So I guess it's kind of a mixed bag.
For sure. So that kind of like that wraps up at least the bulk of the questions in terms of what I wanted to get factually about the programs itself. But from your experience, would you be willing to share any stories? You can leave out names or anything like that. But I mean, you just touched on something right now with schools that might be harsher or more strict and things like that. So maybe you can share something from your experience about anything that you've had to deal with like that.
Oh,
Am I gonna get you in trouble with this?
yeah. I don't know if I want to open up this can of worms, but honestly speaking, I haven't dealt with anything too bad. Um, you do hear of horror stories sometimes, but surprisingly, it's been good for me so far. Obviously, there's a lot of fun stories about going out and partying and meeting people. One of the cool things is you get to meet people from different countries, right? So I've made friends from people from America. Most of my friends now are American. I
Right.
have friends from England and a bunch of other countries, South Africa included. So it's kind of nice knowing that in the future, if these people do decide to go back home and I do decide to visit these countries, that I do have a plug. I have somebody there that like, hey man, like I want to visit your country. They can show you around, and you won't feel like a foreigner in that country because your friend that you've known for a while lives there, and you can catch up and kind of just they'll show you around and stuff. So
For
that's a
sure.
cool thing. In terms of particular stories, maybe I'd have to save that for another episode because I have to filter like what I can share and what I can't share, because I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret. It's like, oh man, why did I say that? But honestly, like there's no nightmare stories. There's been a lot of fun experiences so far since I've been here. Obviously, the reason that would be part of the reason why I would come back. If it was bad the first time, I wouldn't have considered coming back the second time, right? So,
100%.
um,
No, that's
but
totally
yeah,
fair.
I
That's totally
um,
fair.
I was gonna say I'm gonna. I don't know if you have any more questions. We can kind of start to wrap this up.
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask if you had anything else to add about anything else that you would want us to know about this, and anything else that you want to add into here.
No, that's pretty much it. And if you want, you can obviously hit us up on Instagram, Virtual Freeway Pod. Check us out. If you have any questions, you can DM me. I'll respond to anything you have with regards to teaching English abroad. I have obviously limited knowledge when it comes to Asia. Specifically, my knowledge is for Korea, South Korea.
Right.
And people can do this as well in Europe, by the way, in South America. So it's not just like a an Asian thing. There's many places, many countries that you can choose from to go abroad. And not just that, for those people that just don't want to teach English, there's also like volunteer opportunity, volunteerism, which I've heard is like is more of a volunteer and working kind of thing. So
Right.
like you'd maybe go to Africa and you are traveling and you're touring, but you're also doing some work, some voluntary work on the side. So that's another way that people can get out and experience cultures and then kind of understand what that lifestyle is like. So you don't just have to teach English. There's many different ways in which you can get out there and travel and learn and enjoy life.
100%. So obviously we can dive into more of those into different episodes as well, but this is kind of our first episode into this world of digital freedom and that virtual lifestyle. So new episodes coming out soon, but we want to hear back from the crowd as well, from our listeners, in terms of what kind of topics that you want to hear, what you want to learn about, and we're looking to get different types of guests from here on out.
Yeah, Sherson's right. So we're going to try and mix it up. We're going to get a lot of people on here that are kind of living that digital lifestyle like Sherson said. And we hope you guys enjoyed the first episode. This is season 1. We do hope to have multiple seasons where we're going to, give you the type of content that you're going to expect. But those details will come out a little bit later. But we appreciate you guys listening.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please give us a follow on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube. Details are in the description of this episode. We'll see you on the next episode.